Il va en particulier nous faire prendre à la fois un peu on va s'avancer un peu plus en profondeur et en même temps prendre un peu de distance par rapport à l'aspect strictement antisémitisme de l'utilisation du terme et des définitions, puisqu'il va nous conduire dans les méandres de la politique du Labour et des attaques contre l'aile gauche du Labour. Je lui donne la parole en le remerciant vivement d'être venu de loin, lui aussi, pour nous aider à réfléchir à ce sujet. À vous la parole. Merci.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much to Jean and Francine for inviting me, and especially to my brilliant team of interpreters who've been keeping me connected during these past 2 days. Needless to say, if there are any errors of fact or reasoning in what follows, blame them. It's wise to make life easy for your translator, and so I hope you'll forgive me for sticking closely to my prepared remarks. It's been well documented that allegations of anti-Semitism are instrumentally deployed by the State of Israel and its organized supporters abroad to present Israel as a victim rather than a persecutor, while at the same time discrediting critics of Israeli policies. Such efforts have frequently been advanced under the conceptual rubric of the new anti-Semitism, which identifies animus against Jews as the driving impulse behind international criticism of Israel. Not coincidentally, panics around a resurgent new anti-Semitism have tended to erupt when Israel has come under international criticism or pressure. For example, after the 1973 war, in the wake of Israel's invasion of Lebanon in 1982, and during the Second Intifada. In this short presentation, I will argue that the controversy over anti-Semitism in the British Labour Party that has raged since the election of Jeremy Corbyn in 2015 represents a novel variant of this phenomenon, a new anti-Semitism. Whereas the new anti-Semitism charge was traditionally wielded primarily by Jewish and pro-Israel groups against Israel's critics, the Campaign Against Corbyn has seen anti-Semitism allegations additionally weaponized by the full breadth of the British elite, as it has sought to paralyze an ascendant challenge from the left and to demoralize and divide a newly mobilized popular constituency. If anti-Semitism has often been deployed to defend an embattled state of Israel, it is now, in the UK, being deployed to defend an embattled British establishment as well. So, what's distinctive about the Labour anti-Semitism controversy? Israel's summer 2014 assault on Gaza, Operation Protective Edge, provoked widespread indignation in Britain as elsewhere. In one London march alone, as many as 150,000 people took to the streets. As Israel came under intense criticism, its defenders portrayed popular opposition to the assault as anti-Semitism run wild. In truth, anti-Semitism on the UK's Gaza demonstrations was confined to a marginal fringe, while opinion surveys revealed no discernible change in public attitudes toward Jews as a result of Israel's massacre. What's relevant here is that the campaign against this terrifying new anti-Semitism was largely confined to the usual suspects, the pro-Israel Jewish press, as well as various Jewish and pro-Israel groups, who organized rallies against anti-Semitism and issued dire warnings of the kind that have now become commonplace. For the first time in 350 years, the chairman of the Jewish Leadership Council intoned, "Jews are beginning to question whether they can securely think of Britain as their natural home." This was in 2014. The fear-mongering did find its way into the broader public sphere, due in part to reports of anti-Semitic violence elsewhere in Europe, and in January 2015 to the Charlie Hebdo attacks in France. But it did not dominate national headlines for any sustained period of time. In the case of the Labour anti-Semitism controversy, the Jewish press and established Jewish organizations were again at the forefront of the media campaign. The Jewish Chronicle set the tone in August 2015 when it depicted Jeremy Corbyn as a friend of, quote, Holocaust deniers, terrorists, and some outright anti-Semites, and warned that unless Corbyn answered its questions in full and immediately, he would be, quote, regarded from the day of his election as an enemy of Britain's Jewish community. Fast forward 3 years, and one finds the Jewish Chronicle, Jewish News, and Jewish Telegraph, the 3 leading Jewish newspapers in the UK, publishing an unprecedented joint front-page editorial pronouncing Corbyn, the elected leader of the main opposition party, quote, an existential threat to Jewish life in this country. However, unlike the new anti-Semitism panic in the wake of Operation Protective Edge, the Labour anti-Semitism campaign has repeatedly dominated national headlines over a period of 3 years and counting. To give just one indication of this disparity in media salience, August and September 2014, at the height of the backlash to the Gaza demonstrations, saw 49 articles in the national press with anti-Semitism in the headline. In July and August 2018, the words Labour anti-Semitism appeared in fully 386 headlines. This raises an obvious question. How might we account for the unusual intensity, breadth, and persistence of the Labour anti-Semitism controversy? It might be contended that if the political and media elite kept returning to Labour anti-Semitism, this reflected public interest in the issue. But the public has, in truth, been stubbornly indifferent. After the June 2017 general election delivered better than expected results for Labour, many participants in the Labour anti-Semitism campaign themselves lamented that for the majority of the British population, to quote one of them, anti-Semitism did not seem to be an issue. A high-profile demonstration against Labour anti-Semitism, organised by the Jewish establishment in March 2018, failed to attract participants beyond the core ethnic constituency, with the exception of several MPs opposed to the Labour leadership. Even at the peak of the media hysteria over Labour anti-Semitism, in August 2018, a survey found that the issue had, quote, barely broken through into public consciousness, with the researchers concluding this is simply not a big story for most people. An alternative explanation for the media furore might be that the UK indeed experienced a crisis of anti-Semitism. But here again, the evidence suggests otherwise. Surveys consistently show that animus against Jews in the UK is A, marginal, infecting approximately 7 to 8% of the population, and B, much less prevalent than animus against other minority groups. A May 2015 poll typically found that whereas 7% of respondents harbored a negative impression of Jews, dislike of Muslims reached 40%, and of Roma nearly 60%. Importantly, these results have been stable since the early 1990s. There's no recorded spike of hostility toward Jews in or since 2015. If anti-Jewish animus in the UK is relatively marginal, it is also comparatively mild. What anti-Semitism does exist mostly takes the form of prejudicial attitudes, stereotypes that, while not pleasant, carry little or no material consequence. On the contrary, relative both to the general population and to other ethno-religious minority groups, Jews are disproportionately wealthy, educated, and professionally successful. It is true that reported anti-Semitic hate crimes have increased since 2015 as part of a broader rise in reported hate crimes across the board. However, the absolute number remained low. The pro rata risk for Jews of experiencing a reported hate crime was smaller than for other minority groups, and the increase in reported anti-Semitic hate crimes was much smaller than the increase for other minority groups in this period. To give a sense of proportion amidst the hysteria, according to an analysis of police national hate crime figures for the year ending March 2017, 2.3% of all reported assaults were classified hate crimes. Of this 2.3%, 1.3% were classified anti-Semitic. Of this 1.3% of 2.3%, none reached the level of serious injury. A statistician associated with the pro-Corbyn group Jewish Voice for Labour calculated on the basis of these figures that the general risk for a British citizen of experiencing a criminal assault was 50 times greater than the risk for a British Jew of experiencing a specifically anti-Semitic assault. If, as has been alleged, British Jews are facing an existential threat, doesn't it follow that all British citizens are facing an existential threat times 50? Moreover, the rise of reported anti-Semitic incidents began long before Corbyn was elected Labour leader in 2015. In short, British Jews remain, in both absolute and relative terms, popular, prosperous, and secure. The media panic over anti-Semitism did not reflect, but rather grossly distorted, the measurable reality. Even were it true that levels of anti-Semitism had sharply increased in the UK since 2015, that still wouldn't explain the emergence of an anti-Semitism controversy focused specifically on the Labour Party. On its face, the notion that Britain's principal party of opposition had become a hotbed of anti-Jewish racism was highly implausible. Both front-runners in the 2010 Labour leadership election were Jewish, while Jews are prominent among Corbyn's supporters and team members. Polls find that the level of anti-Jewish prejudice on the left is indistinguishable from the general population, while anti-Jewish prejudices have been found less prevalent among Labour voters than among Conservative voters. The far right, by contrast, is disproportionately prejudiced against Jews and appears to be responsible for the majority of politically motivated anti-Semitic incidents. It would be unsurprising if, as Corbyn became a lightning rod for the dispossessed and disillusioned in an increasingly unfair British society, and Labour Party membership soared from around 200,000 to over 500,000, the absolute number of anti-Semites within the party's ranks increased. But the notion that anti-Semitism plays a significant role in the politics of Corbynism, or that it has become a significant presence within the party under Corbyn's leadership, is wholly lacking in evidence. To prove their case, Labour's critics have combed through the social media accounts of alleged party members, typically at low and mid-level rungs of the organisation, in search of incriminating posts or tweets. But their findings do not demonstrate an increase in Labour anti-Semitism. They simply show that you are more likely to discover anti-Semitic social media posts among a membership numbering hundreds of thousands if you go looking for them. What's more, many of the centrepiece controversies of the Labour anti-Semitism campaign amount, on close inspection, to less than they at first appear. Consider two prominent examples. The 2017 Labour Party conference marked the consolidation of Corbyn's leadership. Success in that summer's general election infused the proceedings with self-confidence and goodwill, even between factional opponents. To judge from national media coverage, however, Labour's annual gathering more closely resembled a Nuremberg rally. In under a week, 5 leading right-wing newspapers published between them more than 30 articles depicting the conference as a festival of Holocaust denial, anti-Semitism, and intimidation. A government minister described Labour as, quote, the most anti-Semitic party in generations, a description that no doubt dismayed the fascist BNP, while even the purportedly non-partisan Equality and Human Rights Commission ventured that Labour, quote, needs to do more to establish that it is not a racist party. These allegations of anti-Semitism at the Labour conference all cited the same handful of incidents in support. Strikingly, virtually every allegation concerned statements made by Jews. Listeners will be familiar with the old cliché, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. If the UK press is to be believed, a modification is in order. 2 Jews, 3 anti-Semites. In fact, not one of the allegations withstood scrutiny. All either misrepresented events or imputed anti-Semitism where none existed. Here is not the place to run through this record in detail, although I have done elsewhere. One incident may suffice for illustration. It was widely alleged that Labour's conference played host to Holocaust denial. One New York Times column went so far as to suggest that, quote, a motion to question the truth of the Holocaust was proposed. The sole cited instance behind these extravagant claims was a comment in a conference side event by an Israeli Jewish activist who was not a member of the Labour Party. He called in the Q&A session which followed his presentation for freedom of speech for even the most controversial opinions. He cited the Holocaust denial as an example, without, needless to say, endorsing the substance of such an opinion himself. It should be noted that this position of his is simply the position of UK law. Every other cited instance of anti-Semitism at the Labour conference was equally spurious. Incidentally, this is the context to the, in my opinion, absurd controversy over Ken Loach. His notorious comments formed an extemporaneous response to a question from a reporter about Holocaust denial at the Labour conference. If Loach's critics are truly concerned about the trivialization of Holocaust denial, they'd be better to direct their anger towards those who recklessly or cynically fabricate it. Now let's fast forward to the summer of 2018, which saw Labour again engulfed in controversy. Jewish organizations had lobbied the party to adopt the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, about which we just heard. The IHRA document comprised a vacuous core definition of anti-Semitism, followed by a laundry list of illustrative examples, the majority of which concerned Israel. Labour adopted the vacuous core definition in December 2016, but there was concern that some of the illustrative examples would jeopardize freedom of speech vis-à-vis Israel. As Labour's ruling body drafted a revised code of conduct on anti-Semitism, Jewish organizations insisted that the IHRA document be adopted in full with no amendments. In the end, Labour's proposed code of conduct incorporated most of the IHRA's examples in addition to the vacuous core definition, but excluded a clause which stigmatized as anti-Semitic the act of describing the existence of a state of Israel as a racist endeavor. Enraged, this is when the 3 leading British newspapers published their joint editorial branding Corbyn an existential threat to Jewish life. A leading Labour MP confronted Corbyn in Parliament, calling him, quote, a fucking anti-Semite and a racist. Excuse my French. Every day brought a new scandal or multiple new scandals in the press for days on end. In truth, however, the IHRA definition was intellectually as well as practically worthless, the suggestion that anti-Zionism was inherently anti-Semitic was preposterous, and British Jewish groups demand that the elected leadership of a mass party impose the preferences of an external and hostile constituency over and against the wishes of its membership was an unprecedented presumption. In short, no compelling evidence has been presented of a significant rise in anti-Semitism within Labour. Jews continue to be active at all levels in the party. Nobody is organising on an anti-Jewish basis, and aside from a number of offensive social media postings, and which internet user here does not occasionally encounter an ad hominem attack or offensive posting online, there isn't much of a story here. Even if anti-Jewish animus is confined to the margins of Labour's membership, it might be argued, there still remains the fact that Labour is now led by an anti-Semite. I don't propose to spend much time on this suggestion here, since it so flagrantly conflicts with the public record. Suffice it to say, the vast preponderance of the allegations against Jeremy Corbyn personally are either baseless or relate to his positions on foreign policy rather than his attitude toward Jews. The case against Corbyn reduces in the end to two trivial episodes: a Facebook comment he made in 2012 querying the removal of a street mural which depicted wealthy businessmen oppressing the masses, and an extemporaneous speech delivered in 2013 in which Corbyn appeared to accuse British Jews of lacking a sense of English irony. In fact, neither case was straightforward. The anti-Semitic elements of the 2012 mural were possible to miss at first glance. Thus, a Jewish Chronicle report referred to its anti-Semitic undertones rather than overtones. And Corbyn's apologetic explanation that he had failed to look at the image closely before firing off his online comment is therefore plausible. Meanwhile, Corbyn's 2013 comments appear clumsily phrased rather than malicious, and his reference to English irony was a joke aimed at three specific pro-Israel activists rather than at British Jews as a whole. More importantly, it behooves us, as the far-right gains in popularity and power across the globe, to consider the bigger picture. Jeremy Corbyn has been an MP since 1983. His record in public life extends further back still. His opponents have spent 3 years exhaustively trawling his record for incriminating material, and the worst they've come up with is a misjudged Facebook comment and one badly worded improvised joke. Against this, any honest observer must weigh the fact that Jeremy Corbyn has been a dedicated anti-racist and anti-fascist campaigner his entire political life. This commitment spans, at least, from 1977, when Corbyn helped organise a major street action against the far-right National Front, to his inaugural act as Labour Party leader in September 2015, which was to join a demonstration in solidarity with refugees and asylum seekers. As a left-wing Jewish activist in the UK notes, quote, "Whenever there's been a protest against racism, the two people you can always guarantee will be there are Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell." Corbyn's record on anti-Semitism likewise speaks for itself. His mother participated in the famous 1936 Battle of Cable Street, when Jews, communists, socialists and others fought to prevent the British Union of fascists marching through London's East End. Corbyn has often referred to this as a formative political reference point for him, which has a deep personal significance. As an MP, Corbyn consistently and frequently signed parliamentary motions in defence of Jewish rights and interests. And in June 2015, not long before his election as Labour Party leader, Corbyn was the lead signatory on a call to mobilise against a planned neo-Nazi demonstration in Golders Green, a Jewish area of London. In short, both in Parliament and on the streets, Corbyn has been a consistent opponent of racism and anti-Semitism, and a close ally of progressive Jewish groups in the UK. The claim that a government led by him would pose a threat to Jews not only lacks merit, but flies in the face of his record. To conclude, for more than 3 years, the Labour Party and its newly energized and expanded membership have been subjected to an unprecedented political and media assault. Jeremy Corbyn has been systematically depicted by the British establishment and its publicists as, to quote then Prime Minister David Cameron, a threat to national security. The press, dominated by established corporate interests, has subjected Corbyn to what a London School of Economics study termed a process of vilification. Corbyn was, the study found, systematically treated with scorn and ridicule in both the broadsheet and tabloid press in a way that no other political leader is or has been. The study continued that the British press had also repeatedly associated Corbyn with terrorism and positioned him as a friend of the enemies of the UK. In this context, how ought we to interpret the unprecedented media controversy over anti-Semitism in the Labour Party? If it was not driven by public interest, if it did not reflect an objective crisis of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party or in UK society more broadly, if Jeremy Corbyn himself numbered among Britain's most dedicated campaigners against racism, anti-Semitism, and the far right, if, in short, the only significant observable difference between the period prior to the Labour anti-Semitism controversy and the period during and after it was the election as Labour leader of an incorruptible opponent of social injustice and a dedicated defender of Palestinian rights, then what plausible explanation for the Labour anti-Semitism controversy is there, except that it was a weapon deployed by pro-Israel networks, a vengeful Labour right, and a Conservative Party in disarray to discredit, demoralise, and defeat a potent and principled threat to the status quo. Thank you.